Borderlands 2 was the game for me during my teenage years. I remember the time I went online with some strangers and fought Terramorphous, who is this massive creature who can one-shot you. Or worse, knock you off the map. Who I met during my journey is Gage the Necromancer, who could summon her robot friend to help fight off enemies. Then again, I can use Death Trap as a decoy so I can flank my foes by surprise. I remember the one time the game had a content update where your levels are increased, and a new game mode where the enemies have like 10 times the health with regen. I remember the old exploit where you can go through this one room during a certain side quest, and you can get like 4 loot midgets under these boxes at once. Said update also introduced the Cyan Rarity Pearlescent weapons, and only like 4 out of 12 guns are useful. You know, like the Butcher, the Sawbar, Tungska, and maybe the Unforgiven. Although I would like to talk about Borderlands, notably the first one, I'll put this game to rest and start working on this video. Crap.
This is nothing! I've done worse to myself!
So, 2022 has come and passed. It's a wild year for lost media, because a lot of the sought-after relics has been found. For TV shows, we have the Forbidden Sesame Street episode with the Wicked Witch, the Jeopardy pilot, and the American version of Sailor Moon. For games, we have BattleBots, which I covered in an early episode, the original version of Rayman Raving Rabbids, and Duke Nukem Forever, which not only contained the Fable 2001 builds, but also the original 2D version and the recently leaked 1998 Quake 2 build. Also Endangered Species, which later became Vivisector Beast Within.
Look, she's just sleeping. She needs rest.
Though I do have Duke Nukem Forever on the mind because there's a whole U-Haul load of stuff to take in. But I don't have that kind of time. Besides, I already got carried away from the previous episode. Besides Duke Forever, which will be a special episode down the line, we need to start something a bit more smooth. Something that pumps serotonin straight to your brains when I show you this. On today's filler episode, we start this year with some early 2000s Windows nostalgia. So ladies, gents, trans, and pinball wizards, welcome to Lost Legends. The short tale of 3D Pinball's Space Cadet. Once upon a time, there's a short-lived company called Cinematronics Limited, no relation to Dragon's Lair. The company is founded by David Stafford, Mike Sandage, and Kevin Gliner, and they only made a few games under their belt. Those being Tritris for Virgin Interactive, Jack Nicholas 4 for Accolade, and Full Tilt Pinball for Maxis. The last company you might be familiar with, as they're famous for The Sims, and SimCity, and SimCopter, and SimAnt. Pinball games aren't entirely new. There exist many pinball games before Cinematronics' take, starting with Atari's Video Pinball from 1979, Nintendo's Pinball from 1984, DICE's Pinball Dreams from 1992, and Epic's Epic Pinball from 1993. Full Tilt Pinball by Cinematronics is just another well-crafted game, but little do they know, this will become their most popular title, if not the most popular pinball game. But not the full version. This was all I know before I worked on the episode, until I stumbled upon Dave Plummer. Plummer used to work for Microsoft as the operator system engineer. He's responsible for making the task manager, calculator, and zip files. Why I mention him is, well, he's the one, along with a small team of programmers, who ported the game to be compatible with Windows 95 and NT at the time. According to him, a Microsoft manager asked him to port a pinball game on the OS, so they eventually converted the original source code to make it compatible to several types of non-Intel architectures. Back then, it's a bit of a crapshoot on what runs on what hardware quite good. I mean, have you ever heard of a game that can only be run on a Quantum 3D graphics card? Anyways, I'll give you the full video in the description or pinned comments. Now let's talk about pinball. Let's begin with the full version of Full Tilt Pinball. Well, what the heck you want me to say? It's pinball but with 3 tables. Skullduggery, Dragon's Keep, and Space Cadet. It has some nice pre-rendered 3D graphics for its time, good music by Matt Ridgway, and it's a hell of a time waster. Not to mention very robust. By the way, excuse my gameplay, I don't fall into the whole pinball wizard category. Like a Billy called himself the gamer of the century. Anyways, the common goal for pinball is simple. Achieve a high score by launching the ball, hit some bumpers and stuff, get the ball through some hoops, gaps, etc. And maybe complete a task to rack in some big points. You also have to prevent the ball from reaching the bottom with the use of the flippers. There is also a notable feature that gives Full Tilt its name. You can tilt the table slightly, which is ideal to prevent your balls of steel to reach a place you don't want to go. It's a risky maneuver as you hold it long enough, the game will punish you by locking up the entire table and waste your ball. It is notably hard to keep the ball on the table, and it relies on the sheer physics RNG. You may be lucky if you get the ball where you want it to go, or the ball would go somewhere else, nudge a corner here and there, and worse, roll down between the flippers, losing the one task in progress. Fortunately, there are a few things to help you. You'll be awarded with replay balls, which allows you to shoot again. Redeploys, similar thing but only if you lost the ball too early. Extra balls, valuable extra lives. And the absolute madness that is multi-ball. The games are released on Windows 95 and Mac OS in Halloween 1995, and these are very well received. Unfortunately, Full Tilt couldn't run well on modern OSs without some sort of compatibility patch, and even that you still have to deal with the issues, notably on full screen. So where's the part where everyone who owned a copy of Windows NT 4.0, 2000, or XP played? The version everyone played is simply dubbed 3D Pinball, released 2 months earlier than Full Tilt. It's Space Cadet, but with differences that isn't just a cartoon spaceman. It is played with a slightly lower resolution, multi-ball was removed in favor of replays, no dynamic music variations, and other minor things. So how did this stripped down version came to be? Well, let's find out. Well, this is where it all started. Windows Plus 95 is what you like to call a $50 expansion pack for your operating system. What does these things enhance? Well, several things. One, it changes your startup screen if you've installed it. Second, you got Internet Explorer 1.0, some disk compression programs, dial-up stuff, graphical improvements, and other things that, believe it or not, Windows 95 didn't have, like moving entire windows around. Yeah, you see this? This is revolutionary. Windows Plus is where the first incarnation of 3D Pinball surfaced. It was so popular that people didn't spend $50 for Internet Explorer or them fancy anti-alias fonts. They spent it for that pinball game. This was later become a pack-in game for Windows NT 4.0, ME, 2000, and all the way to the final versions of XP. Sadly, it never appeared on Vista and beyond, in favor of added bloatware, tablet OS features, and Cortana. The Microsoft reason, and by extension Plummer himself, was there are some collision bugs in the 64-bit versions and they couldn't resolve it. According to a video by NCommander, there are patched versions of Pinball that are playable and packed in with Windows Longhorn, also known as the beta version of Vista. The other reason, according to him, is that Pinball would look out of place on Windows Vista with its 640x480 resolution, while Solitaire and Minesweeper got revamped to fit with the next generation of the eponymous operating system. However, if the Wikipedia page was correct, there was an attempt to revive Pinball through Microsoft Garage, which was initially successful. But looking through the legalese, it won't happen. Not even a release of the source code. Now remember, this is a Maxis game, and guess who owns them? In a nutshell, Weird legal stuff, a 64-bit bug, and overall luck prevented 3D Pinball to reappear in later Windows versions. Then again, I could get it running on Windows 10 no problem, and it's only a megabyte in size. So how did Pinball, a 32-bit game, could still run on a 64-bit machine? Well, it's simple. Ever heard of Windows on Windows, or WoW? It's a compatibility layer that makes old 32-bit applications run on 64-bit platforms. It's not new, they even made one for 32-bit systems that can run 16-bit games. Think virtual machines but in the bare veins of it. Or if you're a Linux user, kinda like wine to an extent. You may be thinking that a stripped down version of Full Tilt have a beta, but we have a few, ranging from bug fixes to visual updates. So let's try the earliest version known as Maelstrom 0.91. Oh yeah, Space Cadet was going to be named Maelstrom. There's two versions of Maelstrom 0.91, one from April 26th and another from May 12th. The first two Maelstrom tables are quite different from each other. The bottom attack bumper is moved over to the right, the tilt light is not an X, the launch ramp is a solid color, and below are yellow arrows instead of the colorful light bars. And the right side of the table has some major changes. There is not much to talk about, apart from the graphics which are rough, and it has this space alien thing on top of the table. The scoreboard on the other hand had a different layout, featuring the score having the bigger box than the text, and some scattered dots to resemble space. The game also used different sound effects, certain elements don't work, and the ball has a tendency to get stuck. Notably the outer right lane that's supposed to launch the ball through the chute. Oftentimes the ball didn't launch, and instead rolled to the bottom of the table. One notable thing about these tables is the lack of missions to rack in the big points. Another thing is the music, which in itself is unfinished. The following builds did have some bug fixes, but there's also some graphical improvements. Maelstrom 1.0 had Cinematronic's name briefly visible on the right side. The German build had a facelift with the final version sound effects. The early preview version replaced the Maelstrom marquee with the early version of Space Cadet, and both Max's and Cinematronic's names are labeled in yellow, like in Full Tilt. Finally, the late preview version updated the Space Cadet marquee, removed the stars on the scoreboard, and the entire table is shaded. This also fixed the right outer lane bug. Oh, and the company's names are recolored to red, which made it harder to see. And to end this chapter, here's an evolution of the tables from the earliest beta to the final Full Tilt version. There isn't enough material to make the pre-release chapter, so let's move on to the stuff of the miscellaneous. Now, did you know there exist cheats in 3D Pinball? During the game's startup, type in hidden test, that includes the space. If you've entered a debug mode where you could move the ball with your mouse by holding the left click. There's also some other functions, like pressing Y to change the text on top of the window to display the frame rate, pressing R promotes you by 1 rank, typing M shows you a separate window displaying the memory, and H to end the game with 1 billion points. However, if you end the game with a legit score, then that 1 billion point score would remain second place. If you access all 4 debug functions, then you'll see a lot of red on screen, indicating the updated frames. Then you nudge the table and you'll see nothing but red. This is only exclusive to 3D Pinball. Besides that, there's some more development leftovers found in both 3D Pinball and Full Tilt, like the component screen, an error message about the lack of tables, and even the About page. One more thing, here's the entire pinball table in full, but without any elements. Note the plunger, which is unseen during gameplay. So 3D Pinball, and by extension Full Tilt Pinball, is an absolute classic. A fun time waster ingrained in the memories of those who owned or used to own a Windows NT machine. Believe it or not, the game had a small speedrun community, and to make this even more crazy, the task record for Space Cadet to reach the highest rank is less than 2 minutes. Let me repeat that. 2 minutes. So what happened to Cinematronics after Full Tilt Pinball? They were bought by Maxis, renamed them Maxis South, and even made a sequel to Full Tilt in 1996 with 3 more tables. In my opinion, it's not as memorable than the last game, and no amount of Comic Sans is gonna change that. They also made Marble Drop in 1997, and they were closed down in the same year when EA bought Maxis for $125 million. Maxis South had plans for a Diablo-inspired game called Crucible, which was cancelled by the minute they were shut down. Shame. Like I said, this is a short episode. Filler exactly. Okay, it's not that short. But I wasn't planning on making this one before I started this series. But 11 episodes in a season looks a bit odd. And that's that. But one question remains. What is the season finale? And I've been thinking though. But the season finale is a Capcom trilogy. A game that holds near dear to my heart, and it's not what you think. What you're thinking is probably next season's episode. But what I'm talking about is him. The biggest badass who ever roamed the land. Maximo. And I didn't know this game was going to be a trilogy. Well, come to think of it, before that, I didn't know the game had a sequel. So tune in next time where I cover the 2-part season finale. One is going to be Maximo, and the other is going to be the cancelled third entry. The cancelled conclusion to a trilogy that's a spin-off to Ghosts and Goblins. So anyways, if you enjoyed it, like, comment, subscribe, do whatever. And I'll see you later. Bye.